Alright, this show sucks and I'm gonna tell you why. So I gotta be honest, I haven't seen a ton of the original Good Times from the 70s. From what I glimpsed over in my research, it seems like a fairly successful sitcom starring a predominantly African American cast, which is pretty cool, especially because of the time it came out. It might seem silly now, but from what I've seen, it looks like it was a show that not only had good jokes, but covered serious topics in a mature way. I wanted to bring up the original because I was originally going to do a comparison video, but an issue came up. The original has like 130 episodes spanning across like 6 seasons. Yeah, I'm not watching all of that. So instead, I'm going to be comparing it to another show I feel it's trying to replicate, but we'll get into that. In the meantime, this pile of human excrement is everything wrong with modern adult animation. As I mentioned in my last video, though I think there's hope for adult animation, shows like these set the genre back at least 10 years every time they're made. Loud, obnoxious, pandering, and disgusting violations of the art form that is animation. It does nothing right. From the animation, the humor, or the oh so riveting satire. Now I'm gonna have to break down these concepts section by section so you too can feel the pain I felt having to endure this poor excuse of a show. The animation in this show is terrible. It honestly might be the worst animated show I've seen ever in terms of its visual style. Everything from the character models, their movement, and the shapes of the environment. It's all so bad. Honestly, it's an unintentional horror show if you ask me. Everyone's proportions are so off. Their head, mouth, and hands are never proportionate to their body, so it looks like a bunch of disfigured humanoids from the Chernobyl power plant or something. It looks like an animation that came out of a Meat Canyon video. I'd rather watch this in all honesty. It's way less scary to look at than this. Plus, what's going on with the architecture and backgrounds? Everything is crooked and it has such an ugly color palette. When it comes to animation, this show is an all-out assault on your senses. Being pepper sprayed in the face isn't as painful as having to look at this. Now, okay, the animation is bad. But how's the voice acting? Honestly, it's not terrible. It's definitely not good. But there are some talented people in the cast who could have been funny had they been properly utilized and directed. Especially the baby, but every time he speaks, all I see is Lamar from GTA 5.
Maybe you got rid of that old yee ass haircut you got, you get some on your
Wait a minute. The baby? Lil baby? And baby?
But why doesn't it work even with the somewhat talented cast? It all comes down to the writing. And like the animation, the writing makes me want to get a lobotomy. Okay, so the writing, as I just said, is terrible, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. On a pure subatomic level, there are good ideas present, but the writers have no idea what to do with the concept alone, so they just end up with terribly written dialogue or random parody gags. Like, there's this one episode where the water is like flooding the building and the mom has to get water or something, so she turns into Indiana Jones to do something. You get it? She's like Indiana Jones.
That don't make no sense.
Most of the humor relies on voice actors to nail it in the delivery, and while they do their best, the dialogue isn't up to the same standards. It also doesn't help that the show tries to be a social satire and fails on all fronts to make us not just laugh, but to say anything of value. When watching this show, I felt reminded of another animated comedy series, covering the same topics and shenanigans and issues pertaining to African American culture, and that show, of course, is The Boondocks. This is easily one of the best satirical cartoons not only of the 2000s, but quite possibly of all time. It tells the story of two brothers named Huey and Riley Freeman as they're moved from the inner city into a white suburban neighborhood with their grandfather, Robert Freeman. From there, the show delves into issues pertaining to African Americans in a post-9/11 America. There's several reasons why this show is still revered even to this day. The animation, for one, is not just well made, but it's also very pleasant to look at. It has a very distinct style, paying homage to anime while still maintaining its own visual identity. Also, the more attention to make them look as human as possible while still maintaining the hallmarks of cartoons make the humor in it all the more funny. Like, take a look at this scene with the character Tom, for example. Based on the art style, it seems like a character that should behave and sound like something in a very serious animated drama. But then in this scene, when he gets angry at the other guy for cutting him off while parking and then insults him, he does this.
What did you say?
Look how his face contorts, his pupils shrink, and the voice acting. Then he does like this jump kick on this dude. All these things make the delivery of the line and subsequent outcomes comedic perfection. This show is filled to the brim with this kind of humor, and you'll always be able to find something to laugh at each episode. Not only that, but the subject matter and themes explored in each episode always serve as an interesting critique not only of American society, but black culture as well. You see, in the Boondocks, the main characters are basically metaphors for certain archetypes within the black community. There's many videos that go into depth on this concept, but I'll give you a quick rundown. Riley Freeman is an example of a child who has bought into essentially thug culture. The gang life appeals to him, and he looks up to rappers and embraces the street life. He serves as an example of those who perpetuate negative stereotypes that actively harm the community. Robert Freeman, the grandpa, is an example of an older generation reminiscing on the days of the civil rights movement, thinking their generation fixed everything while ignoring the problems that face the black community today. Tom, the character I mentioned earlier, is an example of a straight-laced goody two-shoes who has essentially abandoned any trace of his black cultural identity. True, he's done very well for himself as a lawyer, but to his community, he's a sellout. Uncle Ruckus is an example of a black person who is actively racist against his own. He praises the white man wanting to be a part of their society and tries everything he can to disassociate from his own by taking stereotypical but old-school white conservative views on them. And finally, there's Huey Freeman. He basically functions as the show's voice of reason, calling out people in society and the black community for their ridiculous actions. He represents the part of the black community that's deep into activism and wants a full-scale revolution. However, while he's soaked in his activism and his critiques of society, it prohibits him from growing as a person, and he sometimes is just a pessimistic even to the people who care about him. Not only does the show give us these archetypes to put into funny scenarios, but they also serve as a meta commentary for the demographics within the black community and their experiences. It's hilarious while at the same time very introspective and profound. Good Times tries to replicate all the things Boondock does to an extent, but the characters, animation, and the writing lack any depth when they try to be funny or cover serious issues. Like, there's this one episode where the family decides to work for Elon Musk, and it's revealed he's using them to like one day populate Mars because black people endure so much. Again, like the random pop cultural gags in the show, the ideas and subject matter it's trying to satirize is far too vague or surface level to feel like it's saying anything of value. However, sometimes the show is so in your face with its messaging, it can be as subtle as a cheese grater sliding up your face. An example is one episode where the daughter gets her first period and it deals with the struggles of a girl maturing into womanhood. While this could have potential for a hilarious but also interesting commentary on womanhood in the black community, it delivers a nightmarish fever dream of disgusting period jokes, relishing in degenerate self-destructive behavior, and the most over-the-top fourth-wave intersectional feminist talking points that would even make She-Hulk cringe. It relishes in the type of behavior and stigmas that the Boondocks actively sought to critique. It lectures the audience with no space for interesting discussion or commentary, and most unfortunately, it is far, oh so far from being anywhere close to humorous. I tried watching the show in its entirety, but it got to the point where I would just fast forward through episodes. It was just too painful to endure. Even though this show's an absolute dumpster fire, there is some good to come out of it. Pretty much immediately upon the trailer's release, the internet gave it a big ol' middle finger.
What are we doing? Hollywood. Netflix. Do y'all know what y'all are doing anymore? Do y'all even know what y'all are doing anymore?
I really don't know why I expect anything different. Why do I expect anything different? Why does Netflix play in our face like this?
All right, guys, so it looks like we're getting stereotypes of the black community in this. Who greenlit this?
It's a show that tries to be an animated sitcom and give representation to black Americans, but it's instead a disgusting, offensive caricature of their community. And I think the most offensive part is that they took everything in the original that made it great and spat in its face. As I said, I never watched the original Good Times entirely, but I completely understand how it was not only a cultural milestone for black representation, but it also served as a powerful message that even in the darkest situations and challenges they faced, they could always look forward to the good times, hence the name. This new show does none of this. It doesn't inspire, it doesn't encourage discussion, and it doesn't make people laugh. I guess you could say this show is just a bad time.